Why do many college-age Christians fall away from the faith when they go to college? How can they strengthen their relationship with God during college rather than destroy it? Join us today as we talk about Christianity and college and how we can continue to grow spiritually during that time we're away.
Come on, you need a drink, partner. Expecting trouble? I'm always expecting trouble. What do you think you're smoking around here?
Stop it! You're acting like a child!
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Welcome to our virtual studio. We are yet again recording with a shelter-in-place order. I'm here with Travis and Jared. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, man.
Alive.
How you holding up?
Good. I'm pretty tired. We're on a staycation. We had planned a week-long vacation before the COVID stuff happened, and we couldn't really reverse that. So we had a week where we're stuck at home. So we've been doing projects. You can see some like tools in the background and redoing a lot of stuff, painting, and so we've been working hard. So I'm going to need a vacation for my staycation, but it's been fun. Enjoying the time, working together with my wife and spending time with the kids. So
yeah, I've been really encouraged this week. I've had some really cool opportunities to just one of my coworkers has been asking me a lot of questions about the Bible, and I encouraged him to join Branch Life's live streams, and he watched a master class. He was asking me what kind of Bibles to get and stuff. So it's been a really encouraging week for me.
That's awesome, dude. Just so our listeners know, we are recording this episode on May 8th, and this probably won't come out until like the second week of June. And the funny thing is, so like yesterday, our stay-at-home order was actually extended until, I think it was June 4th. So it's wild. I think the last week's episode was recorded like 5 weeks prior to that under a shelter in place. And now we're recording episodes to release in like 5 weeks that will still be released under the shelter in place order. That's wild. So today we're going to talk about Christians and spiritual growth in college. I know we all graduated from college. I graduated a couple years ago. Travis, you actually just got your degree, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was kind of a little drawn out. I did it a little differently. I did go to like a 1-year Bible Institute, and then I did the rest online, but it was kind of spaced out just because I got married and had twins and stuff. So I was kind of picking away at it at the end, finishing up like a class I needed to finish. So I did officially graduate, a couple of weeks ago.
What did you graduate with?
It was nonprofit management. So it's similar to a business administration degree, but with a focus on nonprofit ministry. So got a lot of that administration, business skills, but specific to things you'd encounter in a nonprofit world. So
sweet. And then Jared, you graduated from college a few years ago as well, right?
5 years ago.
Oh, wow, you're old. You're an old man.
I am an old man.
And you went to Word of Life, right? And you graduated with a degree in
well, it's a certificate.
Yeah, Bible
in biblical studies.
Oh, cool.
That's where I went as well. I didn't name the place, but went to Word of Life. Now it's out there.
So I mentioned last week on our podcast, we were talking about post-truth. I went to Westchester University. It's a big secular college, and so that's where I graduated. I did a 4-year degree, got degrees in sociology, philosophy, and political science. So a whole lot of fun. But so something that we all can think through and process as we've all experienced this is the whole idea of spiritual growth while in those college years. Now, I did some research this week, guys, and it was really interesting, not surprising, but something to talk about. Barna Research did a study called Why Go to College? And they surveyed a ton of people, and they asked for their motivations, their reasons why they went to college. And so he came up with the top 10 reasons that people go to college. And I think the first 5 reasons all had to do with bettering off their career. I mean, it makes sense, right? We're taught when we grow up, you go to college so that you can get a good job and provide for your family. So most people go to college to better off their career. that seems to be the main priority here. I know when I went to college, that was my motivation. When I was raised, it was go to college and get a good job. What were you guys like what was your motivations to go to college?
Mine was, I didn't really know what I was doing next, and it was just kind of the natural next step. I feel like that's actually a lot of, hindsight 2020, they might say, yeah, I was doing it to better but a lot of them do it just because that's the social norm. You graduate high school, I got to go around, find what college to go to. So it's like the thing to do. So I don't know if a lot of people know exactly why they're going to college.
Before doing Word of Life, I did 2 years of culinary school, so I was already career driven with that. I think I went to Word of Life because I just wanted to spend an extra year not having to be full-fledged in the workforce, to be honest. And it ended up being a really good growth season of my life. But yeah, I don't really know what my motivation was for going to college.
I think it's like Travis was saying, it's almost like the natural next step that we take, after high school. It's what everyone else is doing. So we just kind of hop on board. I'm going to go through some of these top 10 reasons and give me your thoughts on them. Number one, it's prepare for a specific job or career. So I want to be a doctor. I go to college to be a doctor. Number two is to increase financial opportunities. Other research shows that typically when you have a higher degree of education, this is generally speaking, you make a higher income. So a bachelor degree would make more money than a high school diploma. A master degree would make more money than a bachelor degree. Statistically speaking, that's a trend that we see in the economy and in the workforce. Number three is to stay competitive in the job market. Number four is to strengthen your critical thinking skills. 5 is to grow in leadership skills. So what they did is they kind of chunked these 5 into the category of to better off their career. And then it goes into discovering who you are, learning about academic interests, learn how to make a difference in the world. I think that's something we all can relate to a little bit. Develop moral character. And number 10 is to encourage spiritual growth. The last one on the list.
Was this statistic for Christians or just anybody?
This is for Americans going to college.
So it doesn't have to be a Christian, this statistic. Okay.
Yeah. So generally speaking, with Christians, it might be a little bit different, but I think for the most part, we kind of line up the same as an angsty 17 or 18-year-old. Yeah. The last thing we're thinking about really is our spiritual growth. We kind of just want to get out there, make friends, and discover who we are, right? So another study done by Barna that connects back to this study is that roughly 70% of high school students who enter college as professing Christians will leave college with little to no faith. In other words, 7 out of 10 Christians who walk in as freshmen will walk out as atheists when they graduate. That is mind-boggling today. And does that statistic surprise you guys?
Not from what I've seen. I can verify that firsthand. It's sad and in some ways shocking. It's depressing, but it's not surprising because I've seen it to be true in my life. Not me personally, but around people around me.
I don't know if it's shocking, but it just makes me think were they Christians in the first place?
Right. I tend to lean on the side that if you lose it for good, you never really had it, But it's wild because it also makes me think about how many people will grow up as Christians basically just because their parents were Christians and they kind of grew up in the household and just did what their parents were told them to do, and then that's when they finally got out of the nest, that's where they could really unfold. But
I was just gonna say I don't know this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if this statistic, this 70% of them leaving the church, has to do more with the age range than them going to college. So say they go into trade school or they go off on their own, even if they don't go to a college, I think that 70% would probably still be about right. So I feel like it's more in that age range versus just them having to go to college, if that makes sense, when they're striking out there on their own and all of that.
That'd be something interesting to look into for sure. Another study that they did, I kind of did a couple of Barna studies because they did a lot of joint studies where they studied a lot of similar topics and then connected them into a bigger project. But they also did a study called 6 Reasons Why Young People Are Leaving the Church. And I want to go through this list and I want to get your thoughts on it. So number 1 on the list of 6 reasons why people are leaving the church. The church seems overprotective. 1/4 of 18 to 29-year-olds said that Christians demonize everything outside of the church. I think I can relate to that. I've experienced that quite a bit. What are your thoughts?
I could see how people would think that depending on what church they go to or what circles they're in. A lot of these looking through this list, like coming out on the other side, I'm like, okay, that probably is not true, but could be perceived as true depending on how they're filtering things or what they're going through in life or what churches they're going to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I can experience this probably in the more conservative circles of Christianity where, everything that's outside of the church is like awful bad and you should avoid it entirely. And I think, we could talk about this a little later, but I think people might be too sheltered at that point. And then everything outside of the Bible, everything outside of the church is just bad, evil. You should avoid it entirely.
I grew up just always having, or my family always had a mentality of like, things like Harry Potter and Trolls dolls and Yu-Gi-Oh were like evil because they weren't in the church, and so it was satanic and demonic.
Yeah, I was actually talking about that the other day with my parents because they didn't let me watch Harry Potter when I was a kid because it was like satanic or something. But I watched them all in college. I was like, wow, that's a pretty good series.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Natalie the other day because we watched the whole series. It was when I was out of work for a week. And I was like, I feel bad watching these because I always remember my mom telling me, like, don't watch Harry Potter. It's evil. And now I'm watching it. I'm like, ooh, I'm breaking the law.
Have to call your mom up and confess.
I'll tattletale on you, buddy.
Oh, man.
But number 2 on the list, keep us moving on, is the second reason why young people are leaving the church is because they say that the teaching is shallow. In other words, it's not relevant to me, or it's boring. It doesn't hold any real significance in my life. That's a heavy statement, but I think that can be true for a lot of people that go to churches where the teaching is just shallow and they try to generalize it to everybody, and it doesn't really grab you know.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that their complaint is it's not relevant, it's boring. I think a lot of churches make it shallow to try to be relevant and end up failing.
It can even be a heart issue for the young person too. I mean, they just might be I remember being an angsty teenager. It's easy to rebel against everything you hear. So they might have that mindset too. But number 3 on the list is young people see that the church a lot of the time comes across as antagonistic to science. In other words, they say that Christians are too confident that they know all the answers.
I think that's really interesting because the God of Israel, Yahweh, invented science. So that's an interesting statement in the first place. But I do think there is a stigma, I guess, of pomposity or arrogance, I guess, within the American church anyway. And it's a big problem.
Yeah, I had this conversation the other day. American Christians are some of the most opinionated people on the entire planet. And if you have an opinion that's different from mine, I'm right every time. Like, that's the mentality that we have here. And when I saw this a lot in college, when there's a scientific, a quote unquote fact out there that might contradict what the scripture has to say on something, Christians often just attack science, forgetting that God created science. So if science has found something, science has been wrong a lot in history. They might have just discovered a piece of the puzzle. Somebody said it recently. I was listening to a sermon. Science is really neat because when you make these little scientific discoveries, you kind of discover how God has done the things that he's done to, say, create life on earth, to preserve life on earth. It's very interesting. And I think, Christians can be too quick just to throw science in the garbage, thinking that we know all the answers when, we might actually just have too much of a closed mind to be open to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I think there's a mentality out there on both sides that science is bad in and of itself, or that science and Christianity can't coexist, as if God didn't create science and man's ability to study the world and the things around them. So I think sometimes us being antagonistic towards science could be immature view that science is bad and we can't address it, or that we don't have the answers, so we're scared to address it at all.
Kind of going off of what you said earlier about, like, you know, my opinion is right and everyone else is wrong. That kind of goes into what we talked about last week on relevancy.
Yeah, like post-truth, everyone has their own truth. And this idea that my opinion is always right is not just, you know, applied to Christians. It's applied to, I would say, everybody. Everybody has this mentality that I'm always right all the time, and there's not really an openness to having a conversation to at least hear what the other side has to say. You don't have to believe it, but like with Christians and science, I see that all the time. But to keep us moving on, number 4, for reasons why young people are leaving the church is young Christians' church experiences related to sexuality are often really simplistic and judgmental. So there's very little grace. Say you mess up sexually in the church. There isn't much of a let's talk this through and figure out how we can help you out. Many Christians say that their experience has just been extremely judgmental through this process. And I think that's a shame. Sin is sin is sin is sin, right? Yeah, it's a hard one to deal with for sure.
It's unfortunate. Obviously, it is sinful. The Bible says that we can't compromise on that truth, but it's not simple. You know, the Bible even says that when you sin sexually, you sin against yourself. There are a lot of things involved there and a lot of deep, deep hurts and things that need to be worked through gracefully and patiently. And the church has not done a great job, I don't think, at addressing these issues that need to be addressed. And so, yeah, either they don't get addressed at all, or somewhat like the science one, we just give an immature response and really don't take the time to deal with these things and take them seriously. I mean, they're rampant within the church, and a lot of people are hurting and struggling with these things. So we need to take the time to address them because they matter. So I can see that.
The reason you rarely hear, you know, sexuality preached on is because, and this isn't to blame pastors, I think it's just human nature. I think we're just afraid to preach on that. I think we're afraid to teach that, whether from the pulpit or in a small group setting, because it is a really complicated topic and it can be really easy to, for lack of better terms, offend somebody or hit a button that you really didn't want to hit at that time. It can be difficult to talk about those things and to handle them in the church setting. So I think a result of that difficulty has led to, when it is talked about, it's talked about really fast. You can't really dive in deeply, and therefore it can come across as simplistic or judgmental, even though that might not have been the intention, but it was the result of that fear.
Yeah, well, I just look at the purity culture and the hurt that did. I mean, that is an example of a simplistic and immature response to a really complicated and serious issue. Obviously, they saw a problem, you know, with the sexual freedom culture of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and saw their problem and tried to address it. They just addressed it in the wrong way. So just like, again, the science one, we need to address it in the right way within the church, and it hasn't been done, and it's turned a lot of people off. It's hurt a lot of people.
To keep us moving, number 5 on why young people are leaving the church. And just a reminder, these are reasons why young people are leaving the church, and a lot of these, if not all of them, can be really reflected back into college culture and what we're taught there. But as we're moving to number 5, young people wrestle with the exclusive nature of Christianity. And I think that really connects back to our conversation last week on the post-truth ideology that is rampantly taught in colleges all around the country, is that young people don't like the idea that Christianity, that Jesus is the only way to eternal life with the Father in heaven. And I'm not surprised by that one at all. Number 6, the last one, young people feel that the church seems unfriendly to those who doubt. So say you have a question about what the pastor, taught about Sunday morning that might go against, or that maybe somebody's curious, or maybe somebody's just interested in questioning, why is the church silent on issues of XYZ? You know what I mean? So the church feels unfriendly to those who doubt and question the doctrines and statutes of the church. And I think that I've experienced that a little bit within my personal channels, but I think that can be relevant in certain circles of Christianity. But I think for the most part, pastors and elders are more than willing to have a conversation with you to, if you're doubting something, if you have questions, they're more than willing to sit down and talk that through with you. All of these things can connect back to how you are trained in college, just my personal experience and cultural academia, what these things have promoted. Like I mentioned last week, I studied sociology, and we were told to lay aside any preconceived judgments of religion. And many Christians would say, oh, then the secular schools, they're super bad and they're just making little demons out there. It's kind of a funny story, but I remember I think I was a junior in college, and I was talking to an older woman at a church that I was visiting. And I was like, yeah, I study philosophy and sociology. Oh, good. Where? I said, Westchester University of Pennsylvania. And she, I kid you not, looked at me in the eye and called me a pagan demon worshiper, because she knew that the stigma that Westchester had was like a big party school. And I guess she was kind of like a Christian school only kind of person. But it was kind of a funny experience for me. I didn't know what to do or how to react in that moment. It was very interesting.
I don't know about you, Jared, because we went to the same place, but even going to a Bible Institute, a lot of the people who went there are no longer in the church. Mm-hmm. I would say, I don't think this is an exaggeration, a majority rather than a minority of the people who went to a Christian college that I went to are no longer in the church. If they're practicing Christians at all, I don't see it. So I wouldn't say they're actively involved in practicing Christians, if practicing at all. And I don't know about you, Jared. I mean, and I don't know. I'm just from following people on social media and everything. It seems like a large majority of them, instead of a minority of them, are leaving the church even after going to a non-secular school.
Mm-hmm. I graduated with a class of 99 people, and I can honestly say 25% of those people are still in the church.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah, I would say it's about right for me too. It's heartbreaking, like to think about, like, the classroom you sat in, and then 5 years from now, if you were to only put those who are practicing Christians in the back in that classroom, how empty it would be. But that's so just to say, like, even though our college experiences were probably very different, Tyler, I think the problem is still the same.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing that I think would be interesting to talk about, and I'm willing to do that like right now, is, so like, what's your guys' thoughts? Is going to a secular school, what causes the issue of people leaving the church? Or, is it only proper, or is it better for Christians to go to a Christian school if we're all kind of experiencing these same things? What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it's not the circumstances that make the person, it's the person that makes the circumstances. So I would say, whether you go to a Christian school or a secular school, it comes down to the little choices you make every day between, what you said first thing you did when you woke up, who you talked to. All of those little things make a decision in a bigger role of your walk with Christ. So, for me personally, I went to both a Christian and a public high school, and I did a Christian Bible Institute. So I had a little, and I was homeschooled too. So I had a little bit of everything. And from my experience, like, obviously, through that whole time, I wasn't really having a walk with the Lord, but to see other people on a secular standpoint anyway, to be in a Christian school and not really believe, and then go into a public school and follow into the crowd. Like, honestly, my own personal experience was that, and I know a lot of the time we shouldn't go based off of personal experiences, but with mine anyway, it was more of like when I was in the Christian school, I was less inclined to follow Christ. It seemed almost repulsive to me to be around all of those people that were just kind of, in a very, looking back on it now, I see they were trying to help me, but it seemed at the time that they were just, Bible thumping and just really pushing something that I didn't want to be a part of. And then when I went to Word of Life, I started to understand, and that's when it kind of changed my perspective. So for me, I think that, like I said earlier, it's all about the small choices that you make every day and that's really what makes the outcome, not so much where you are. It's
definitely like an interesting topic, and I think it can be really touchy for a lot of people. But I don't know. I have an unpopular opinion, and that's okay. I'm not fully committed to it, but it's like kind of where I tend to lean. But I tend to lean on the side that Christians should not be going to Christian school, at least through K through 12, just my opinion. And there are certainly exceptions, of course, like, if you want to be raised up obtaining, theological training for purposes that you have. But at least where I tend to go is that the church and the family are mainly the ones responsible for teaching you the scriptures and the spiritual disciplines of Christianity. And then a result of that is your school can be your mission field, when you're growing up through middle school and through high school. And I guess this stems back to a personal experience. I had a really good friend, K through 12, that actually K through 8, I think, went to a Christian school. And then as soon as they hit the public school setting, they just went off the rails. Like they were kind of sheltered in the Christian school environment for so long that when it came to actually experiencing the real world and the temptations that were there was no buildup of there was no resistance buildup in them to say no to that temptation. So it was kind of like, I guess right now we're in this COVID-19 crisis. The immune system builds up a tolerance to different things like viruses and has the ability to fight them off and say no. And I guess metaphorically speaking, my friend who dealt with this didn't have that immune buildup to the things of the world that were easy to fall into. And I guess from my experiences, at least from K through 12, experiencing the world at a young age taught me how to respond to these things. So I went through church and youth group, and my family really helped raise me in a Christian perspective. And because of that, I was able to defend against the temptations in school, drugs, sex, alcohol, all that stuff. Of course, it wasn't easy. And of course, nobody by any means is perfect. But I felt like I was able to kind of defend off that a little bit. But for college, it might be a little different. I mean, you might want to go to a theology or Bible school to get specific training to serve in ministry. Like me personally, I would love to go to Westminster Theological Seminary to get some deeper theological training to use it where I serve in the ministries that I serve in. But that's for a specific purpose. I don't know if I would necessarily want to go to a big time Christian school and pay that money just to get a job as a marketing agent. You know what I mean? But I guess what I'm getting at is you shouldn't put yourself in a Christian school just to shelter yourself from the world, because I think that can be a temptation for a lot of us Christians, is go to a Christian school so you don't have to deal with that stuff. But I mean, Jared, from what you guys were talking about, you still deal with the same issues when you go to a Christian school. You can't really escape it. And the goal really is not to escape it. It's to learn how to be a witness for Christ among it, right? So going to a Christian school can be a great thing, but it could also be detrimental, as I've seen in the lives of some of my friends. But at the end of the day, it is your education or your children's education if you're putting them in K through 12, and that's ultimately their choice. And something to pray through and think about. I always think about Ephesians 6, put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. Equipping yourself for the day-to-day life. Like you said, there is, not a tolerance, but building up antibody, building up an antibody for worldliness, I guess you could say, or secularism. But
I don't know. I kind of am on the fence about both ends. I think that like it's profitable to take your kid to a Christian school so they can learn a biblical worldview. But then it's also profitable to take them to a secular school so they can be exposed to the world and see what it's really like. And honestly, like, for being frank here, have better opportunities in an education system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have my own personal preferences, but I think the issues, I think we've already shown that no matter where you go, you're going to face. So I know we've been talking about the real world, but I think that's kind of a fallacy, and building up a tolerance. Personally, I think that's a fallacy. I think you're going to be in the world no matter where you go, and you're going to face these temptations. I was homeschooled all the way through. I had just as many temptations to face, just as many opportunities. So I don't think I had to go. I don't feel like I had to go to a Christian school or a public school to get those opportunities. I don't feel if I homeschool my kids all the way through, they would be missing something there. And I think there are ways to, like, you can shelter your kid in a public school, you can shelter your kid in a Christian school, you can shelter your kid homeschooling. So I think the family and the church is key. Going all the way from high school all the way to college, it's the family and the church. If they're not prepared in the home, if they're not prepared by the church, no matter where they go, they're gonna fail. I was homeschooled all the way through. I know a lot of homeschoolers who walked away from the church. My wife was Christian schooled all the way through, and a lot of her classmates have walked away from the church. I have friends who are public schooled, and so I have friends in all those different scenarios. Some of them were faithful and are still in the church. Some of them have walked away, and I think. Some parents can do all the right things and do what God commands them to do, and their child will still walk away, But in general, the ones who persevered and thrived and who are still in the church were trained up by their parents, were trained up by their church, were actively plugged in and involved. So I'm not saying you should do one or the other, because I think the key is the family and the church. That being said, you have to look at where your kids are spending their time. If you send them to a public school, they're going to be exposed to a secular worldview, influenced by a secular worldview most of the day. And how are you going to combat that when you only get to see your kids a few hours during the day? Mm-hmm. And on top of that, if you look at a lot of Christian families, they're not practicing family worship. They're not training up their kids in the way they should go. Their churches are not providing them with biblical training. So the few hours that they are experiencing a Christian worldview, they're really not experiencing a Christian worldview because it's not being taught to them in the home of their church. So you put that on top of being exposed to a secular worldview for most of the day, most of the week. And how do you expect them to thrive? I'm not surprised at all. So again, it doesn't matter where you go as long as you're being built up in the home. At the same time, if I were to choose, I think the more the family can be involved, the better, if the family's doing what it should. And if the family's doing what it should and the church is doing what it should, the child should have the means to thrive, even in a secular school, public school. At the same time, don't be surprised if they're struggling, so.
And I think we can easily be worried by this, and this could cause a lot of anxiety. I mean, like, Travis, you have kids that are going to eventually go to school, and worrying about this too much could cause just crazy anxiety. But I think what we have to remember, go back to Romans 8, right? Those whom he called, he justified. And, Christ did not save you depending on the school that you go to, right? It's a pure gift of grace and mercy. So we also just have to have the faith. And this isn't to say we can throw caution to the wind, but we have to have the faith that, those who the Lord calls, he's going to call and preserve until the end. So,
right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he ordains the ends and the means, and he has commanded us as parents to train our kids up in the way they should go, and the churches to be trained. So I think the churches, again, I think these issues we're seeing with the college statistics, I think it would probably be true whether they go to college or not, no matter what school they go to. I think the vast majority of the fact is once they leave the home and leave the church, they can stop pretending anymore, or the shallow foundation and broken foundation that they were trying to stand on falls apart. So I think the key is just to build a firm foundation for that child all the way up through high school and into college. At the same time, like I said before, you send an 18-year-old away. Now, Tyler, you went to a secular school, but you were also living at home, correct? So, like, you still were connected to your church and your family. So imagine going to a whole nother state or across the country to that environment, how much harder that would be.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, even just commuting to that school and, like, being there sometimes, it was still really hard to, fight that temptation. But
it's funny how now that I'm a parent, my thinking has totally changed. I remember talking to a pastor, and we didn't agree on everything, but he was saying that you're a fool if you expect your 18-year-old daughter to go across the country into a secular party school and stay pure. Like, would you expect yourself to be up? We hold our kids to a higher standard than we would hold ourselves to. So, and I'm not trying to be like saying it's wrong to do so, but I mean, be realistic. Do you want to you're kind of setting your kids up for failure in some ways, especially if you're not training them up in the way they should go throughout their, grade school and high school years. So again, I think the family is key. The church is key. And I think that's actually, we're going to find that that's the common denominator and the root of the problem.
I think that the important thing here is to take it back to Genesis 3, where there was a choice between eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil or choosing life, and really instilling that in our kids. Like, life is about a choice. You can either choose to have life with Christ, or you can choose to be wise in your own eyes. And you can apply that to every situation: school, life, extracurriculars, whatever. Like, it all has those two choices.
Right. So, guys, as we're a little bit over time, but that's totally okay. These conversations are awesome to have. And if you're listening to this and you want to continue the conversation, please send us a message. We'd love to interact with you in that way. So I want to give us 5 ways we can grow spiritually in college or in high school and not lose our faith in that way that we've talked about, where we just fall away. And these are 5 things that I've found to be helpful. And I think that you guys will find them to be helpful as well. Number 1, make your spiritual growth your priority. I said it like this in college: Bible before textbooks. When you're in college, it can be super easy to get stressed about college and have to study all the time and read your textbooks. But if you don't mix your Bible in with the things that you have to do, you're going to get lost really quick. You're going to get stressed because you're not finding peace in the Word of God. And when you get stressed, it could lead you to do things you typically normally that you wouldn't do. So Bible before textbooks, make your spiritual growth your priority. Number 2, get connected with a church. This is so important. If you're going off to college and you're going somewhere far away where you're not able to connect with your local church, find one to get connected to. Travis, Jared, like, when you guys went to college, when you guys were away, did you find a church to get connected to, or was your on-campus college experience part of that church?
Our campus actually required that we would find a local church and leave the campus on Sundays.
Yeah, that was we in the same place. So, and then when I did online schooling, I was doing internships in different states and stuff, but I was always plugged into a local church and had some sort of accountability. And was a member of a church. So.
Yeah. So that's important. And that leads us into our third way to grow spiritually in college or in high school, really. If you're on campus or you're in high school or whatever, get connected with an on-campus ministry or a ministry that's connected with that church. I know there are on-campus ministries like Disciple Makers and Crew that have crazy, awesome impacts on many, many lives. And if you're in high school, there's Young Life. I know my brother was involved in that. It's a really cool ministry to be a part of. And that just leads us right into number 4. take on a leadership role in whatever ministry that you become a part of, whether that's leading a Bible study or whether that's just helping to clean up afterwards. What I found is that when you take on a leadership role in a ministry, it keeps you accountable, not only to those around you, but to the Lord. And it keeps you on that right track, knowing that, okay, this is a responsibility that I have each and every week or each and every month that's going to keep me close to Christ during this journey. And number 5, last but not least, never forget that your campus or your school is your mission field. Don't feel bad about not fitting in. I mean, this world is not your home. You're not meant to fit in. So never forget that that's your mission field. You're there for a purpose, and you're there to, be the hands and feet of Christ and be the church in the world. You're not supposed to be of the world. So guys, as we close out, do you have any final thoughts?
My favorite quote is, life is choices. Make the right choices.
I like that. I would just say, like I said before, like making family and the church your priority. If you're not connected to your church, if you're not having accountability, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And as a parent with the kid, if you're not doing that and you send them out, you're setting your kid up for failure. So don't hold your kid to a higher standard you would hold yourself. Would you be able to survive and thrive in that situation? Probably not. So, prepare yourself or prepare your kids, and expose them to those real, expose them to the real life situations and the world from a biblical perspective, and prepare them, train them up in the way they should go, and train yourself and prepare yourself. So.
Amen. So if you're listening to this, Christian, if you're in college or in high school, yes. The answer is yes. It is possible to grow spiritually in college and in high school. It might be more difficult. It might not be as difficult as what you were thinking, but there is opportunity for growth. Really, honestly, the point is you have to strive for that growth, make it a priority, make friends that are going to encourage you in that growth. Don't do it alone. It's a lot harder to do it alone. It's a lot easier to fall into temptation when you do it alone. I think this was a good conversation today, guys. I think it was super applicable to real world situations and what people are actually dealing with. So this is awesome. Hey, if you're listening, remember to subscribe. If you subscribe to our podcast, you'll get it automatically downloaded to your device each and every week, every Monday when a new episode comes out. So make sure you do that. And if you like what you heard, leave a review. This is a great way for us to get your thoughts on the podcast, and just to help us break through some of these algorithms and get more listeners to be a part of the Happy Holy Hour. And if you haven't yet, follow us on the social medias. I think we're on Facebook and Instagram.
Yes.
I think that's it.
That's it for now.
I'm not very great with Twitter, so we're gonna leave it at that. So follow us on the social medias at the Happy Holy Hour, and awesome. Well, join us next week on the Happy Holy Hour podcast.
See ya.
Bye.